everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to go over an email that was sent to me by Rob. As I'm going through emails, I'm trying to get everything completely caught up, so if you've sent me an email I will get to it, but right now we're on Rob's. And he sent an email talking about the 70 weeks of Daniel, which is basically a prophecy from Daniel chapter 9, and then we talk a little bit about the Antichrist as well. Before I go into the email, I want to read from Daniel 9, just to refresh everybody's memory. And then here, this chart is kind of the visual representation of this prophecy. Now, this graphic comes from some other Christian denomination, and I know that this is an idea that's widely held excuse me, by evangelicals. So that's why we have to be careful, because they don't have the same concepts and they don't have modern revelation like we do. So this is their view. This is primarily where this idea comes from. So you have the 70 weeks of Daniel. Each week is 7 years. So basically the first 69 weeks begins when the decree goes out to restore Jerusalem. Okay, so from about the time of Daniel until Christ comes, and then what they do is they cut off the last week and put it all the way back here in the last days. And they believe that this 7th week is actually occurring right now as we speak. A lot of them will match this up with the 2 great American eclipses. The one that began in 2017, and then the one that's coming up in 2024. So many believe that we're in this 70th week. Now, I haven't been able to find anything that supports the idea that this is our interpretation of this scripture. You'll notice things here like they call the time between Christ being crucified until now the church age, which we would call the Great Apostasy. So you can see how there's obviously big differences in the way that we interpret things, and that's why we have to be careful. So this is the idea right here. Okay, now we're going to read from Daniel 9, and then we'll go into Rob's email. Okay. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, Jerusalem, to finish the transgression, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity. Because remember, Jerusalem and Judah were destroyed, carried away captive because of iniquity by the Babylonians. And to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy, which would be the Messiah, Jesus Christ, when he comes the first time. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. Okay, so this is talking about once the Babylonian captivity is over, and once they're allowed to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, you see here that it has 7 weeks, right? But then it has 62 weeks. So 62 weeks, that's 62 weeks, plus 7 brings us to 69 weeks. So that's where that comes from. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, which is to say killed, crucified, but not for himself, because he doesn't need to be crucified for himself or do the atonement for himself, so he's doing it for everybody else, but not for himself. And the people of the prince in the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now, remember that after Christ was crucified and resurrected, after that, sometime after, Jerusalem was destroyed again by the Romans, and they destroyed the temple. Now, Rob has some things to say about some of these words here, like destroy, and then remember this right here. The end thereof shall be with a flood. So remember that, flood. Okay, now here we go, the last verse. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So this is referring to that last 70th week that the evangelicals break off and put in the last days. So, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Many people believe that's temple, like work at the temple. So, for example, if the 70th week is not at the end in the last days, then this could be referring to, excuse me, simply when the temple is destroyed, then the sacrifices and temple work that was going on would stop, right? The sacrifices and the oblations. So, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that being determined shall be poured upon the desolate. And this right here is sounding a lot like the abomination of desolation. He's basically saying that here. And we know that the abomination of desolation is the destruction of Jerusalem. Okay, so now that we've read that, and now that we have this idea in our mind, the proposed meaning of this scripture, let's read what Rob has to say about it. And I think that this is a really good commentary right here. Let me take a drink really quick. Hi, Jared. After the printing press flooded Europe with books and Bibles in the 15th century, the layman was able to read the Bible for himself and started seeing the Catholic Church as being somewhat suspect. This led to the Reformation. Concerned about their eroding power, the papacy needed some doctrinal cover. They wanted a plausible interpretation of the Antichrist being both in the future and in the past. There seemed to be two Jesuit priests that were key doctrinal leaders of the Counter-Reformation, Francisco Ribera and Robert Bellarmine. You can Google these individuals and go down the historical rabbit hole. There's a lot of information and counter-information to sort through. I think the most convincing evidence that I can find that the Daniel 9 70-week prophecy has all been fulfilled is that there are almost no citations of verse 24 through 27 by an LDS prophet, seer, or revelator. It also never made sense to me that you could just break a piece of prophecy out of a timeline and push it into the future 2,000 years. And I would tend to agree. I don't feel like there's a whole lot there in the scripture itself to suggest that it was pushed forward into the last days. That's just me, and it sounds like Rob agrees. Some key pieces of information are in verse 26. The prince is the same prince as mentioned in verse 25, the Messiah, Jehovah, Christ. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the prince, shall be 7 weeks. So yeah, I never noticed that before. It basically already identifies the prince, because down here, okay, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince, Messiah, that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Well, see, that's where, okay, but he explains further, so just wait. The people of the prince are the people of the southern kingdom, or Judah. 3 Nephi 9:16, I came unto my own, and and my own receive me not, and the scriptures concerning my coming are fulfilled. The Hebrew word translated as destroy carries the connotation of corrupt, spoil, ruin, pervert. Matthew 23:37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. So the Jews, through their wickedness, did in fact cause the destruction of the city and the second temple in 70 AD. And yeah, I could get on board with that. Okay. And that's obviously what happened. It was because of wickedness and rebellion against Christ's church that caused all this destruction, and also for the great apostasy. The word flood is used as a metaphor for a storm, a scourge, and invading army. Okay, so that's where flood comes in. He's saying that this can be a metaphor for a storm, a scourge, and invading army. So if we go back here to 26, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off or crucified, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Or if we insert his what he's saying here about flood being a metaphor, the end thereof shall be with a scourge, an invading army. What was the other one? A storm. Okay, talking about the end of Jerusalem and the temple. Then the end thereof shall be with an invading army, scourge, a storm. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. Titus and his army certainly surrounded Jerusalem like a flood, and there were definitely many desolations. We have our own flood overflowing scourge that we will be dealing with in the near future, as the curse for not serving the God of this land is spoken in Ether chapter 2 begins to be fulfilled. Yeah, we know that there's going to be another surge, or another surge. No, there's going to be a siege on Jerusalem leading up to the second coming, and that Christ himself is going to solve that problem. He's going to save the Jews as Jerusalem, specifically the city, is under siege. And we've covered that before in other videos. There are a bunch of other scriptures that deal with the understanding of verse 27, and also others that help us to understand why Daniel was praying and confessing so profusely when this vision ensued. This chapter has nothing to do with an end-time 7-year prophecy. Well, according to our opinion, right, Rob? I don't know that we can say that absolutely for sure, but I would agree with you that there doesn't seem to be any evidence or anything in the church that suggests that this right here is the correct interpretation. I haven't found anything. Nothing in student manuals, nothing in general conference talks, or any sort of church publication at all whatsoever. Okay, so let's see. Okay, this chapter has nothing to do with an end-time 7-year prophecy. Speaking this to the Christian world at large is likely to draw some ire, as this is a bit of a doctrinal sacred cow to them. I am a bit concerned with some members of our faith, including my own extended family members, as this seems to be more and more getting adopted as a legitimate piece of doctrine. And yeah, I'm concerned too, because I think there's a lot of things that come mostly from evangelicals that really don't seem to line up with our own interpretation of Scripture. Because if they did, like one of the ideas is having a singular one person Antichrist, like the big bad Antichrist of the last days, like the end of the level boss, if this was like a video game. Antichrist. There's a lot of people in our church that believe that, and it seems that that idea comes from other denominations. I haven't been able to find anything at all, not in conference talks, not in student manuals, not in the Ensign, Liahona, whatever, that would suggest that we, as Latter-day Saints, believe that. And yet there's many members of the church that do. And then this is another one, is the 70th week of Daniel. This is another thing that seems to be mostly an evangelical thing that has been adopted by many members of the church. And there's others too, if I were to think of it. But anyway, yeah, it is concerning. That's, I think, one of the things that I'm determined to do with my channel is help people see that we need to go first to our own interpretations of scriptures. And we have a lot of ways that we can find out what we, as Latter-day Saints, believe about the scriptures. We have chapter headings within the scriptures themselves. We have the footnotes within the scriptures. Sometimes there's Joseph Smith translations. We can also look at conference talks, and with the help of the, let me pull it up, with the help of the Scripture Citation Index, sorry, let me pull it up here. Okay, so over here in the Scripture Citation Index, this is where you can find how many times certain scriptures have been referenced in general conference talks. Over here in this right panel, this is where you would find that. So you would go down here to Daniel, in this case, and then you would go to chapter 9. Now notice that chapter 9, it only has 14 references. Compare that to chapter 2, which has 690. Chapter 7 has 246. So chapter 9 has not been quoted very much at all. So if we go here, it looks like these verses that we're talking about, they've only been covered or referenced 2 times at all. Let's see, this first time, it's in the prophet Joseph Smith, or teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith, 43. So that's not even a general conference, although it's, you know, from Joseph Smith. And then, let's see, what's the other one? Oh, this one's from Orson Pratt. And see, now you know my feelings about these early leaders. I think that they do have a lot of truth, but again, it's my opinion that there's some concepts back then. I don't know what he says. I'm not going to go through that and try and figure that out. But in the early days of the church, it really does seem that there's certain concepts that weren't fully understood, that through time, the doctrine became more clear as more and more revelation was received. So I think it's interesting that, again, that these verses having to do with the 70 weeks of Daniel aren't even quoted at all in General Conference from 1942 till present. So yeah. Okay, so let's go back here. So I believe the danger is that as we keep the commandment to watch, watching for the second coming, if we are watching for the wrong thing, we are apt to miss something critical. Satan wouldn't be behind this type of deception, right? Sarcasm. May you continue to have ears that hear and eyes that see, so that you will continue to be able to tell the difference between truth and error. Cheers, Robert. Cheers. All right, so that's it for this one. Thank you, Rob, for sending me this email. I agree with you. I think you're right in this. So, and I think that this is kind of shed some more light on these scriptures. Now, everybody else, you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know what your opinions and thoughts and additional information is. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, and then make sure to share this with anyone that may find this helpful. And I'll talk to you guys later.